Three, two, one. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Come Rain or Shine. This is going to be one of my last guests for a while, because as you all know, I'm going to be re-engaging with Jody Mayberry and be the guest on my show again, which I'm really looking forward to. But I'll tell you, I am so glad this will be a very memorable podcast for you, or at least it will be for me. I know that. So today we have Ray Edwards with us. I've known Ray for a couple of years now and followed him, and we've done some podcasts together. Ray is a copywriter. His first book was How to Sell Copy, How to Sell Copy That Sells. No.
How to Write Copy That Sells.
That makes more sense, Ray. How to Write Copy That Sells. And he, which is a great book. Really this idea of persuasion and influence and how you use words and how you get people's attention. And Ray is a master of that. And his latest book is called Read This or Die. Now, talk about a copywriter. And I know there's a backstory to this. You had a friend who used this in one of his marketing campaigns, but it certainly gets your attention when you see this book. And I want to just say up front, I read Ray's book. Now, I'm guilty sometimes of reading the beginning of books, perusing the rest, getting the main points and moving on. And Ray's was one of the first in a long time I read cover to cover. I've just started to go through it again. I think it was the right place at the right time with the right message, and it has really helped me think differently. So I really want you all to listen today, because if it can hit you just half the way it did me, I think you're going to learn a lot today. So Ray, welcome to Come Rain or Shine. And how are you today?
Thank you. And I am better than stupendous. That's how I am today.
Better than stupendous. Well, I'll tell you, Ray, you have quite a story. We're not going to be able to go through the whole thing today, but I would love you to give our listeners some of the highlights of your story and building up to 2020, which is where, you made some major changes in your life, which I think is going to be a big part of the show today and talking about.
Sure. I was a kid who wanted to be on the radio. So I got on the radio when I was 14. I did that for about 30 years, a little over 30 years. I became a manager with a large company of radio stations across America. I left that profession to be a copywriter online, and I wrote copy for some well-known people like Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guys, and many more, and had a really successful business writing copy and creating marketing campaigns for other people, teaching them. Eventually, I moved into teaching people how to do that for themselves. And then in 2011, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which I kept hidden for a while, but eventually I could not keep it hidden anymore. And it is a progressive degenerative disorder. There's no cure. There are medications, there are treatments, but they only work for so long. The outcome is usually predictable and not very nice to look at, not very nice to experience. And right before the pandemic, I began to decline pretty rapidly. I got to the point after post-pandemic, I got to the point I could not walk, I could not feed myself, I could not drive anymore. That was after having gone through rotator cuff repair on my right shoulder, which was super painful and difficult. And it was during the pandemic. Everything was delayed. Everything was made more difficult. We all know, we all went through it. And during that time, I got into a dark place mentally, because all the things I had believed in up to that point in my life were failing me. My religion was failing me. My philosophy was failing me. My business was failing me. And I was failing me. And I hit the low point one night, 3 weeks after surgery. I was in a lot of pain in the living room of my house. I had already been to the emergency room twice with other problems. I had a blood infection. I was having trouble getting off the opioids they gave me. I say they gave like it's their fault that I took too many of them. It was not their fault. It was mine. They warned me, but I reached a point in the middle of the night, one night, where I was ready to take my own life. I was in so much pain, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. Nothing I had believed in all my life was working for me anymore. And I had a bottle of OxyContin, and I had a bottle of Xanax, and I had a bottle of Jim Beam, and I thought, this is the ticket out. And thank God I had the presence of mind to think about what that action would do to my family. What that decision, it would take my pain away, or so I thought. How much pain it would cause other people. And because I had those thoughts, I chose not to die. I chose instead to keep going. And I did. It was a long, hard road, and it involved me, as you said earlier, I really had to take a look at everything I had believed in and re-examine it. And that was the journey that I outlined in the book. And I also sat down and thought through what my options were. I thought, okay, something's got to change because nothing's working. What am I going to do? My self-help guys are not helping me. My motivational speakers are not helping. Motivational speakers are not helping me. The people I had counted on all my life to keep me pumped up. The preachers I knew were not helping. We drove all around the country, going from one miracle evangelist to another, trying to get healed divinely. That wasn't working. Vortexes, crystals, sage, you name it. I tried it. And I realized, okay, so reality is not changing. I still have this disease. So reality is never wrong. So I must be the problem. So I had to step back and say, what am I believing that's causing me to get into this dark, desperate place? And is there something better I can believe that'll bring me out of that? And something one of my friends said early in my diagnosis came back to haunt me. He said, well, Ray, you got it. So now what are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it? It pissed me off. I was so angry. Yeah. There's a saying, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So I decided to sit down and do what I knew what to do best. I'd spent all my life persuading other people to buy things. Back when I was in radio, I wrote all the ads for the radio stations and for the clients. And as a copywriter, of course, I've written all these big sales letters and marketing campaigns for my clients and the companies that I did work for. So I wrote myself a sales letter. And that sales letter started with those words that are on the cover. Read this or die. And the full headline of that letter I wrote to myself was, read this or die, a failure, and as a man who broke his promises to his wife and his son and everybody he loved. And of course, that was unacceptable to me. And the letter, if you read it, it's in the book. So I give the whole letter in the book that I wrote to myself. And it was an ad to say to me, wake up, you are a loser right now, and you need to get up off your butt and figure out what to do to change. If you can't change the circumstances of your life, you got to change your response to those circumstances. So that's what I did. I wrote in the letter what I had to do, why I had to do it, what I stood to lose if I didn't do it. And I began to change. And the end of the book is, well, here I am. So that's part of the ending. But the biggest message in the book is my situation didn't get better. It got worse. The disease got worse. The symptoms got worse. The problems it created got worse. But I got better. You know, Jim Rohn says, don't wish that things were easier, wish that you were better. So I didn't just wish I was better. I began to be better. And it's still a struggle to this day. There are days I don't feel like getting up and doing what needs to be done. But when I consider the alternative, I realized, well, this is my chance today to not wish things were easier, but for me to be better. So that's what I do every day now. And wow. I was in that state of not being able to walk, not being able to do my work, not being able to drive or feed myself, or sometimes even get myself to the bathroom when the book was finished and sent to the publisher. and ready to go out to the public. So the last chapter of the book really happened after the book was published. And that was, I had deep brain stimulation surgery, which appears to have turned back the clock on my symptoms about 8 years. So I'm driving again now. I'm here at work. I'm doing podcast interviews. I'm writing copy. I'm doing all the things I loved to do before, but I appreciate them a heck of a lot more now than I did then. I can tell you that.
That is fantastic. And I'll tell you, I want to break down some things you said and bring some things from the book. But one question I have, how often do you pull that letter back out and reread it?
Pretty often. It used to be, I was reading it every day. Now it's probably every week I pull it out and look at it again, because I have to remind myself. It's so easy for us. You know, after I had the surgery, it was like a miracle, not only physically for my abilities to get around and do things, it was a miracle for my attitude, because I was just grateful all the time. And that lasted about 3 months.
Yep.
And then I began to forget how far I had come. And this is something that the author Dan Sullivan talks about in his book, The Gap and the Gain, where especially entrepreneurial type people, successful people, driven people, tend to always look at, well, okay, I achieved this mighty, wonderful goal. We just made $1 million. We got to make 5 million. How do we get there? We don't even take time to stop and celebrate what just happened. Right. So, yeah. So I have to remind myself every day to be grateful for where I am, what I have the ability to do.
Well, I'll tell you this, the reason I asked that, and I see this happen in companies, and I see it happen with me, and I see it happen with people in general, is everyone starts strong. It's easy to be inspired at one moment and be all in. But then when you go back to your normal day, everything falls back into place, and it's hard to keep that. And it sounds like, I've never been a big journaler. We're going to pause. Oh, there you go. We will cut that last section out and start from here. So the reason I asked that is, we're all good at kicking off really strong. And I see that in companies. When I was at Disney, I saw that we would start out projects. We are going to do this. We were going to stop all meetings and be out with the guest all the time. And, everyone was gung ho. And then sustaining these efforts is the hardest part. And I think facing up to that, and there's something really powerful about putting it in writing, I would say, right? Having a piece of paper and the handwriting, and you can see what you wrote. And it kind of, I guess, creates some accountability. Like when you wrote this, you were really focused on this. Are you as focused today? And can you get back to that state of mind that you were in when you wrote this letter?
Well, the natural thing for me to do is to forget and drift, as you were describing, because that's what we humans do. We tend to get caught up in what's currently in front of us, the current events, the current of society, the current of culture, the current of the news. And as Tony Robbins says, the current keeps carrying you along until one day you realize, oh, shoot, I'm up that well-known tributary with no visible means of locomotion. Yeah. So that's my tendency. So that's why I wrote the letter, and that's why I keep a copy of it handy. I keep it on my iPhone and on my iPad and on my computer, and I have a paper copy because I have to look at it a lot, and I have to remind myself. I even have videos of myself when I was much more disabled and just in a state of misery. I go back and watch those videos sometimes to realize you're not half as bad off as that guy is. So stop your bitching and go do something.
Love it. I love that. So in the book, you mentioned, I think it was 80 or 90% of the thoughts that we have every day are the same. We have the same assumptions, the same beliefs. We default to the same reactions. And I'm paraphrasing what you put in that book, but read this or die. But this idea that we have the same thoughts every day. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you get out of that routine. And something specifically that I thought was powerful was this concept of, are you doing things today that you're going to regret in 10 years from now or in 20 years from now? And can you pull that regret forward? Can you pull that pain forward to today and feel the pain you're gonna feel in the future and make it today to create a sense of urgency? This seems really hard to do.
It is difficult to get yourself to do it. It's not hard to do. It's kind of like, exercise, because exercise is not really that difficult. I mean, it may be strenuous. You may push yourself to your limits, but the harder part is to get yourself in the freaking gym to do the exercise. And so I have a question I ask myself every day. And in the mornings when I have journaling time, I'm thinking about my life, thinking about what I want to do today, what I need to do today. And I ask myself this question: what can I do today that my future self will thank me for 20 years from now?
Yeah.
And I take the time to actually write that out. And I try to make it something different every day. And it doesn't always have to be a huge thing. So if I take a 1 hour walk today, I know my future self will thank me for every one of those I do. Because it's, when you're men of a certain age, you begin to appreciate everything is harder than it used to be.
That's for sure.
Your recovery time is, well, not everything, but most things are more difficult than they used to be. The recovery time from exercise, from illness, is longer. And the damage you do by eating the wrong things, doing the wrong things, saying the wrong things, and more importantly than all that, I think even, is thinking the wrong things. Because our thinking compounds. We all know about compound interest. How if you put money in the bank and you let it pile up, you keep adding to it, over time it expands geometrically. What if your thoughts work like that? And what if those doom and gloom, pessimistic, negative thoughts that we let creep in, if we keep piling them up, the compound interest on those is you're a miserable human being if you make it to the age of 100 or 90 or 80 or whatever your number is. So I'm always trying to do things my future self will be grateful to me for, and look back and say, thank you, past Ray, for taking care of things for me so I'd be as well off as I am now.
And that's a habit you form.
Yes, I would call it a discipline, because I know it's not truly a habit for me, because I have to put guardrails in place to make sure I do it.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Michael Hyatt he's one of the most self-disciplined people I know. And I said that to him one day, and he laughed. He said, no, I'm not. I said, but Mike, you made this planner, you got this full focus company, you got a course on how to be productive and disciplined and regimented and how you run your business. He said, why do you think I had to invent all that stuff? Because I'm no good at it. I'm the least disciplined person I know. He said, the number one habit I have is starting over.
There you go. So you talk about in the book, this idea that, and I guess I don't know specifically what it was, but we start to believe things about ourselves also. I'm not a great reader, or I don't have discipline. And I think we let that define ourselves, and then we get caught. We get stuck with this idea that, well, we just can't do that. We can't, that's something, I don't have that skill set. Maybe my parents told me that, maybe my spouse told me that, and I just start to believe it. And I compare it to the concept, when at the circus, when elephants are really small, they put that cuff around their foot so they can't walk away. And then as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they have that cuff. And then, later they're 6,000 pounds, and they don't realize if they took one step, they would pull this thing out of the ground. They can do whatever the heck they want, but they're stuck with their mental model of not having the power to be able to do that.
Right. I think they call that learned helplessness. And
learned helplessness.
We all fall victim to that at some place or other in our lives. This whole experience just made me more inclined to and likely to examine my own behavior and my own thoughts. When I learned that most of our behavior is controlled by our emotions, and most of our emotions come from our thoughts, that was like a grand revelation for me. I realized it's true. I mean, reality doesn't change all that much. It is what it is. But what I think about it, how I respond to it does change. And we have control over that. Just like Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning, we have that choice to make. No matter how miserable we are, we can decide to feel and be different.
Yep. That is and like I said, intellectually, I think we all understand it. In practice, you need to practice. So a question, because something that you didn't really get deeply into, you mentioned it in the book, was, the things that you had believed in previously were failing you. And I'm not going to say you turn your back on them, but you embraced new beliefs. And I know that when you mentioned your religion, you mentioned, getting tattoos. And so I guess a lot of this is, how do you reconcile this concept of being judged? Because this social pressure to do what you're supposed to do is extremely strong. And that's another piece of it. And so I may be self-disciplined, but I may be afraid because our DNA and our evolution says we have to be part of a group. How do you make that leap? Or is it the pain gets enough that it's not as important to you anymore?
I mean, that's the pain is a huge part of it. But I feel that pressure even today from people in my life or only tangentially in my life, because they read something about me on the internet. They feel like they need to make a comment about it. Everybody has an opinion. And I've just learned to approach all those people, especially the ones that have caused me the most pain in the past, by being hypercritical. Often it's people who are really close to me. It's not just trolls on the internet. It's people who are very close to me, who come to me and say, I'm really concerned, really worried about what you're doing. I'm afraid you're going to hell now. You've turned your soul to serve the devil. And I know that's not true, but they don't. And I try to approach it with empathy and put myself in the position of the other person and understand what would make you say something like that. Well, if I were that person, why would I say this to somebody? Because I care about them, because I really do believe they're on the wrong path. I really believe they're making a grievous error. I'm trying to help them the best I know how. So if I can take the time when I get that stimulus from somebody where they say something to me that is insensitive or incorrect or downright antagonistic, if I can just pause for a moment and say, there, but for the grace of God, go I, and have that understanding and approach them with kindness and grace and mean it, usually it makes them at least be quiet and stop doing what they've been doing. Maybe not. Maybe they just get louder. But for me, if I have empathy, I can let go of it and move on. And some people have behaved themselves right out of my life.
Yep. Yep. So, it's funny when I read things, it impacts my behaviors. And I was, and I think when you were doing a podcast with Lee, he had mentioned he was going to Carmel, California, with him and my mom. And, our son is doing an internship at Pebble Beach in a hotel out there. So my parents said, well, if he's going to be there, we need to rent a house and be there so we can go cook him dinner.
Oh,
and of course, when we heard that, we said, well, as long as you're going, you better get another bedroom, because we're going to come out and make sure that everything's okay. So we jumped on that and spent some time with them. And I was out on the patio one day, and two women walked up. They had their dresses on, and they said, hey, how are you today? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know where this is going. And I said, yeah, how can I help you? They said, well, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, and can we speak to you for a moment? And I'll tell you, my whole life was always this. It's sort of the stereotype is like, oh gosh, there's Jehovah Witness at the door. How do we get rid of them? And it's funny because when you were talking about this idea of beliefs and just being open and listening and considering things, I said, yeah, I would love to hear what do you have to say? And she took about 7 to 8 minutes. She told me and asked me a couple questions, and she kind of read from her. She had her phone with her, and she read some passages from the Bible. And she said, I just want to leave that with you today. And I said, well, thank you very much. Have a great day. And they went on their way. So I think this idea of opening up our minds to listen, and just because we listen doesn't mean we believe, it doesn't mean we agree, but boy, it makes everything so much more. I feel more at peace when I'm just there to listen to whatever people have to say. And it's helped me also with politics, politics in the news right now. I try not to read too much news, but I just sit there and I say to myself, okay, is this person, sometimes it's clear manipulation. A lot of times, like, okay, they believe this, and I can see their point of view. I absolutely do not agree with it, but if I was in their shoes, there's a possibility I could see the world that way. And then I'm like, okay, and I move on, and it really it creates a lot more calmness for me, I guess.
That is fantastic. Very commendable. It's not easy to do that, especially when somebody's being very, when they're that person who is convinced they're right.
Right.
And they are going to say and do whatever they must to get you to agree with them. It's sometimes difficult to take, but doing what you did this is why I wrote the book. So people could have moments like that. And that makes me so very happy. Thanks for sharing that story.
Absolutely. Well, Ted, as we wrap up, I'd like you to leave you with any other thoughts, Ray, that you'd like to mention, and especially where everyone can find you, and if they'd like to engage, if they're looking for, to work on copyright, if they'd like to engage you, we'll get that information. But I'll tell you, the thing I'm thinking, and I've shared this now with probably 10 people after I read the book, is if what you believe is not working for you, you need to change your beliefs to something that is going to work for you. And that, for me, that encapsulates everything I got out of that book. Is if what you believe is not working for you, you need to change your beliefs. And I love that, because you didn't say if your beliefs are wrong. You said if they're not working for you. And that's a big change there, because it seems so much more logical. Well, how was I wrong for all those years? Have I been wrong for the past year? No, it's just either it hasn't been working for you. If it hasn't been working, you haven't made a change, then you need to get on that. But maybe something's changed in your life, and you just got to decide to believe in something different. If you believe in something different, you'll think differently. And when you think differently, you act differently. So anyway, that was a very powerful thing for me. And I think it's coming up often now in how I'm thinking about how I respond to things, how I'm planning things. And so once again, right place, right time. I'd like to thank you for that. Cause like I said, a lot of these books don't make an impact on me. It's a review of things I know, but this has been very powerful. I wanted to make sure I left that with you. But I'll leave it up to you, Ray, to close it up here and leave any final thoughts and where everyone here can find you.
Well, thank you so much. That's exciting to me that you actually finished the book and that you got some really good words to carry away that have been useful for you. There's a mathematician named George Box in the UK who said, he was speaking about models of the world, mathematical models. He said, he said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So that's that. I mean, most of the things we believe are wrong. If you think about it, I mean, what we think of as reality is only what we see of reality. We know that this table is not solid. There's space between the atoms. We know that nothing is as it seems if you go down microscopically far enough, or you back out, zoom out enough light years, things are different than you think. So in a way, our view of reality is totally wrong. Euclidean geometry is what we use to get around the world. And Newtonian physics is what we use to get around the world. But those models are wrong. Einstein has been proven correct. If he wasn't correct, the internet wouldn't work. Your GPS wouldn't work. None of the stuff we enjoy today and take for granted would not work. So we know those parts of quantum theory are correct, and they make Newtonian physics wrong. But Newtonian physics is very useful if you're trying to get around this three-dimensional Newtonian world. So I love the fact you brought up that point. Find some useful beliefs that serve you and help you be a better person, help you be happier. And I guess if I was going to leave you with any of the last things to ponder, it would just be the way I ended the book, which is I'm still a believer. I have many things I believe. I hold on to them much more loosely now. I don't tie my identity to the things I believe, because I've been wrong often enough to know I'm probably wrong now. And when I find something that proves more accurate, I'm happy to accept that. In the meantime, I just want to live life. There's a passage, we mentioned the Bible a couple of times. There's a passage in the Bible where Jesus says to all the people who are all upset and stressed out around him, he says, hey, think about the lilies in the field. They don't toil, they don't spin, yet not even King Solomon in all his glory was ever dressed like one of these. I think, man, it's beautiful. That's Jesus the hippie, but I love him. And so I just want to live life, appreciate the beauty of life, the beauty of other people, have a good time while I'm here, be nice to people, do some good while I'm here, and notice the miracles that are all around me every day. Like the opportunity for us to talk via the internet, look each other in the eye and have this conversation. That's a freaking miracle. I'm grateful for it.
Wow. Very inspirational, Ray. Thank you so much. Once again, read This or Die. I highly recommend it. And if you don't like it, I will give you a money back guarantee. So how about that, Ray? How's that for copy?
Wow. That's pretty strong.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see how smart that was, but I would strongly recommend it. That's how much I believe in it. So, Ray, thank you so much for being with us. We'll make sure we put all the references back to Ray Edwards, everything he's working on and everything we've mentioned today in our show notes. I really appreciate you being here. And for everyone out there, as always, thank you for listening to Come Rain or Shine.